Perfect. Well, because of time, we got a lot we want to share today. I want to go ahead and get started. So thank you everybody for taking time out of your Tuesday afternoon, or afternoon now for everybody. We're doing this webinar for our whole territory across the United States. So thank you everybody. If it's late afternoon or early lunchtime, hopefully you're enjoying a nice lunch right now if you're on the West Coast. So my name is Lucas Rodriguez. We'll do some quick introductions, go over the agenda, and then we'll just jump right into this and show you everything that we have to offer for Schoology coming up. So again, my name is Lucas Rodriguez. I am the Schoology specialist for the general East Coast Central, pretty much east of the Mississippi. I am located in Sacramento, California, out of our Folsom office, or right next to the main PowerSchool location. We also have Rashad Parker. He is my counterpart. Rashad is the Schoology specialist for the West Coast, Mountain, and some of the Central as well, pretty much west of the Mississippi. With us today, we also have Joe Dolman. Joe is going to be our solution engineer going over the new Schoology features and everything coming out for back to school 21-22. We will call it out again, but I want to also make sure that a lot of these new features with the Schoology do also rely on you updating your current PowerSchool SIS version as well. So keep an eye out for that information from the SIS side as these new releases with 21.4 and .5 start to release. We also have Gina Hartman. Gina is director of our professional services, and Gina will be walking through some training techniques and information around professional development and within Schoology and continuing Schoology education. And then we also have Ryan Embrial. Ryan is our Vice President of Education. Ryan is going to talk about some of the ESSER fundings, title funding, and different sources of funding, and really what is involved for ESSER's funding and how you guys can get more information on that. Please keep an eye on the chat throughout this presentation as well. If you have questions, I will also be posting links in the chat to certain points within our presentation, as well as a questionnaire with some questions that I need you guys to fill out if you do want more information post webinar, especially on the upgrades and increasing some of the features coming out for back to school. This will be recorded. We will get the recording over to you after to share if you need with any peers, or again, if you want to reference back to it. So again, quick introduction on the agenda, introduction to the new Schoology and PowerSchool SIS features coming out for back to school. And in addition to new integrations, we will also be talking about just new features coming out with Schoology, some exciting stuff there that Joe will go through. Then Ryan will talk about the funding, and then I will pass it over to Gina to talk about some of the Schoology professional development. So with that being said, I will forward it over to Joe and let Joe share his screen. We'll jump into it. And again, I'm going to put in the chat some links for you guys to review after. Thanks.
All right, perfect. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep, we're good, Joe.
All right, awesome. Well, first, thanks for taking the time out of your day to come take a look at Schoology, some of the new back to school capabilities that we have that are going to be coming with our new releases. As Lucas mentioned, my name is Joe Dolman. I'm a solution engineer at PowerSchool, so I'll be guiding us through our demonstration today. As we walk through this, just so you have kind of a good idea of what you can expect to see today, these are some of the new capabilities that we will be tracking with that. And as Lucas mentioned, that's going to require that new version of the SIS, the 21.4.1, which should be coming here in June. First thing that we'll take a look at is our elementary view. So we'll be taking a look at that from not only the student perspective, but the teacher as well. So you can see in the classroom exactly how you can create those and set those up. We'll be talking a little bit about the text-to-speech capabilities, so we can actually be able to utilize that within things like our assessments. We'll talk about Gradebook Passback and how that can integrate directly with the SIS and the PowerTeacher Pro, so that your teachers are only entering grades in one place. And that works also for our standards grades passback. Now, there is one caveat with that we'll cover a little bit in more detail. That's going to be the district mastery. You're going to have that as a requirement to be set up, and I'll go into more details on that, and we'll talk about it during support as well. And then finally, the attendance taking. So how we can, really the idea here is to be able to have our teachers go to one location, be able to enter in all of their information and have that pass back into the student information system where you can then utilize that data, but for your teachers, really streamlining that process. So with that though, let's go ahead and jump into our live software. So I'm going to be looking at two different teachers today. We'll start with our elementary teacher just so we can get a good idea of that view. Now you're probably already familiar with many of the tools that we're going to be looking at today. So this is really going to be focused on that new perspective and what we can do within the classroom. So a couple of things when we think about how we engage with students, especially those younger students who may not be reading just yet, there are a couple different ways and new tools that we'll have available for our teachers to be able to engage with them. When we think about things like sharing with our students, we want to be able to have that recording option. So not only can you write that out in text, but you can actually record yourself with those directions and engage directly with those students in something like a discussion board. Same thing when we're actually making posts. So you still have these communication tools available where you can inlay things like images, as well as record audio and audio video with your students. And that way they can use that tool as well in order to be able to engage with the rest of their classroom and their teachers. So that might look quite familiar from the teacher perspective. We're going to come back to that a little bit later and view that as their student. But the next thing that we want to cover is around our assessments. And so when we think about being able to engage with those students, exactly how we can do that in a more engaging way, less text and more kind of video and audio that goes with that. So as I open up my preview, this is just kind of an example assessment that you might be using with your students. The first thing that we might notice with that is how we can do that text to speech. So we can actually have this read to the students, whether that's because they have accessibility needs or if they're just not reading yet. And then when we engage with those students, being able to have the capabilities around engaging them with nice big images, making it as simple as possible for them. And that could be anywhere from the image that we just saw there, where it's drag and drop, to a video that you might inlay with instructions. In this case, we're having the students draw directly on the screen, maybe align that with some shapes that we're learning about today, and so on. And so you can control exactly how those students can engage with things like that. Other examples might be just using simple audio. So instead of using that video, we can actually have a recording where we're going to have our teacher walk through and then have the students drag and drop, move this into the appropriate order. This is all mobile responsive as well. So if they're using this on an iPad or a tablet, they'll be able to engage with those questions in that way. Being able to also allow the students to upload their own content. So once they get those instructions from those teachers, maybe they're going to record themselves performing a task and have that performance-based activity that aligns with that. And furthermore, you can even have those students record themselves. So if we want to go ahead and start that recording, we'll be able to then be able to view that video, and you'll see me here in just a second. Hello, everybody. And then have them actually go through and walk, perform that task and be able to record themselves to submit that to their teacher. It might just be recording, so maybe you don't need that video component that goes along with that, and we can allow our students to be able to do things like pronunciation as they walk through the, in this case, we have a Google slide that's been embedded into our actual question. And so from there, what will happen is you'll have some of those grading items available for those students. So we could actually go through, review that and finish and come back to that later if you're a student, of course. And so that's how we set that up from the teacher perspective. But now what we'll do is, and this is going to be very familiar to all of you teachers out there, but now what we'll do is actually view this from our student perspective. And so this is where a lot of those changes come into play. We've really simplified the user experience within this. So if you are using this on something like a Chromebook or a tablet or something with a touch screen, those students will actually be able to tap right onto that and be able to view all of those assignments that we just saw and were set up as our teacher. So if I want to go into maybe our favorite animal assignment that we have here, we can have these nice big buttons that we're going to give our students access to so that we can see some of that content and be able to record that. You'll be able to see here as well, our teacher can record those instructions so that they can engage with those students even if they're not reading yet. Then we would be able to go through, maybe we're gonna do a recording of talking about what our favorite animal is, start that recording, and then when we're done, we have that congratulations message meeting with us students. Now, if we want to go back into that, maybe we either want to do another attempt or we just want to see what the grading items are. You can align this with learning objectives as well. So it can be things like standards or as well as numeric or traditional types of grades. And then we can be able to, if we want to start that over, give it another try, some of those other options that you'll see here, things like drawing, uploading pictures or typing that out, whatever you might need there. And so next what we'll do is I'm going to switch over to one of my other teachers and we're going to start talking about the grading process. So I'm just going to switch over into one of my classrooms. Again, probably looks very familiar. You might have a different setup for your classroom. But as we align our assignments with our graded items, that's where we can go into our gradebook. Now from here, what you're probably used to doing is either entering this in Schoology or grading those assignments and having those grades automatically move into Schoology. And then if you are a teacher, you may have to go to PowerTeacher Pro currently today to be able to have those grades show up there as well. But what we've done now is you can actually have that automatically sync and automatically pass back so that you have the grades available and you only need to enter them one time. So whether you're doing that from the assignment itself. So if we were going into the discussion board, it's going to update into our gradebook, which is going to update in the student information system. And all of that data goes along with that. So things like comments that go with the grade and can be made available on each one of those assignments. And then you can align that with that gradebook, as well as being able to still add those ad hoc items. So if you do want to add an assessment, test, quiz, discussion, or kind of a generic grading column, all of that can be aligned right here and then pass back into that gradebook. And then as we were setting up this demonstration for today, we noticed that a lot of our people who had interest in this were very interested in the ability to have that standards or mastery grade pass back as well. So as I move towards that and as we align our assignments with the learning objectives that go along with that, this is a place where you can now send that information back into the student information system in PowerTeacher Pro. You don't need to double up on that effort, so it will be available. All of that information, so if I drill down into one of my standards and see the substandards, seeing which students are in which categories there, if there's any need for remediation, and anytime I make any of those manual updates, especially if there's an observational component that goes with that. And so Schoology is the first and only LMS to date that has the ability to do that standards-based grade passback into not only PowerSchool student information system, but any student information system. So we took that as a very important thing, especially with the added distance learning that happened this past year. I wanted to be able to support that. Last thing to cover in terms of some of those new capabilities that are available is going to be around attendance. And I'm going to come back as an administrator and show more details because I know that there was that asterisk with the mastery grading. But just to kind of cover all of our bases here, when we think about being able to take attendance, you can actually do that right within Schoology, and this will pass back that attendance information into the PowerSchool SIS. So as we kind of add those in there, add additional comments if we need to, and we can do that for an entire day, all at once, mark any of those students who might have some of those different attendance codes and so on. So from here, what we'll do is just kind of circling back to that mastery. So we talked a little bit about some of the requirements that are needed in order to allow for these capabilities. And that's going to be the ability when the new version of the student information system comes out, that's going to be the 21.4.1, which should be coming next month. You'll need that for all of the capabilities that we mentioned today. But when we think about setting up something like our mastery passback, what you will need is the ability to have that district mastery set up. And so that's something that we can help you with during the implementation of this. And that's going to be maybe, if you need some help or if you don't have that set up already, it's going to be under your district mastery settings. And so all you would need to do is turn that on. You might need to reach out to PowerSchool to be able to help you set that up if you don't know how to do it already. So with that, though, I will turn it back over to Lucas and see, or Rashad, and see if there are any questions that we needed more clarification on or anything to cover in more depth from there.
We're getting a lot of good questions in the back end here, so we're answering them as quickly as possible. But so far, so good, Joe. Thanks you for the presentation. That was really, really well done.
All right,
Yes,
perfect.
thanks, Joe. And for the questions in here, because we are getting a lot, we'll try to follow up with them after as well, if we don't get to them today. And then in terms of getting more help on how to set that up, in that questionnaire, the link that I included, please fill that out. There's some no's if you need to skip through that, but that will help us get an idea on who we need to follow up and get in contact with for additional support on getting these integrations set up. So just make sure my screen's still showing.
Yep, I can see it.
Perfect. All right. Well, I appreciate that, Joe, and going over that. Again, keep an eye out for the product releases on the PowerSchool SIS side, and a lot of that is going to be related around that as well. Most of these new features coming out are self-service upgrades, but if you want more support, we always have that option as well internally, but we're going to be posting videos and articles on how to get a lot of that set up. Usually the standards-based grade passback is going to be the one that might need a little bit more support, as you do need to make sure that your Schoology district mastery is turned on. And if you're not familiar with that, Rashad and I can get you more information after. So thank you again, Joe, for going through that, and I will pass it over to Ryan to get started on the funding.
Thanks, Lucas. Really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk a little bit about what, in general, we can say is once-in-a-lifetime funding. I think none of us have to be shy about the fact that we will probably never see this kind of influx of federal dollars again in any of our lifetimes. So I'm going to take just a few minutes to talk about all the buckets, ESSER 1, 2, and 3, how it fits, and also a little bit about title funding, because that connects to sort of just this general pot of money that's available. And then key funding, deadlines, and how those allocations work. It may be a little bit of repeat information for some of you. You may already know some of this, but I think it's really important as often as possible to walk through some of this process, because what I have found in my work here close to Washington, D.C., around the strategy work that we're doing here at PowerSchool with the federal funds, the ESSER funds, and all the various title funds, is it can get really complicated, and we want to make it as least complicated as possible, and make sure everyone understands that there's absolutely opportunities to take advantage of these funds for long-term strategic thinking when it comes to how you are building out your ecosystem and how you're supporting teachers, students, educators across the board in your full community. So Lucas, if you can go to the next slide, we're gonna just talk about the stimulus to date. So, trying to figure out how to graphically represent what all this looks like is always tricky. So you can do it a lot of different ways. But I figured like the bubbles are a great way to sort of demonstrate the growth that has happened around this huge pot of education stimulus. We have our CARES Act. It was now, let's see, 14 months ago that this sort of hit the street from Washington, $13 billion for K-12. And then there was the governor's funds, which is $3 billion. Those of you who are on this call or on our webinar that are related to charter schools or private schools completely understand that governor's fund that exists with the CARES Act. And then there's that middle bucket, the $54 billion that hit late in 2020 from Congress, although many people still haven't actually received those funds. I'll talk about that in a minute. That's $54 billion. Again, there is $22 billion for higher ed, and then there's that $4 billion pot that is around the governor's relief. And then both of those get completely trumped by the American Rescue Plan, which came in at $122 billion. And just showed up just recently, thanks to the work in Congress in March. And so really these three buckets equal this incredible amount, close to $200 million that's available for K-12. And there's a spending timeline that gets really muddy as it fits into all the pockets around how you, everyone in all of your school districts normally have to spend money. So Lucas, can you go to the next slide for a second? So let me just explain what you're looking at. Let's start at the very bottom. So on the bottom of this graph, we talk about the school and calendar year. So, you know, you've got your calendar 2020 up to calendar 2024. And then you have the school years, which are built in there. And then above that, you have your state funding cycles. This is pretty much standard for almost all of us. And then on top of that, you have federal annual funding. So I want to make a key point about federal annual funding. Federal annual funding includes all the things that you all are most likely used to receiving. Title I, Title II, 3, 4, Perkins funding, all of those fall in those blue windows. That hasn't gone anywhere, and all indications are under this administration in Washington, those numbers are going to grow, not shrink when it comes to title funding. And then on top of that, in the gradients of green, you have the stimulus funding coming in. And then what we've done is we've drawn the lines down to show how each of those stimulus funding pots, CARES, CRESA, and ARP, the American Rescue Plan, line up in terms of their spending dates. So in reality, the largest bucket of money, the $122 billion, does not need to be obligated until September 29th of 2024. So there is a lot of opportunity to think long-term strategy around how you may utilize whatever the amount of funding is you're getting based on the Title I allocation for your particular district. Lucas? Okay, so if we go to the next slide here really quick, in general, all three buckets have stayed 90-10, meaning 90% of the money coming in all three of the ESSER influxes, 90% of that go out to the local education agency. It gets into the hands of school districts across the country. Now, depending on how your charter is set up, if you're a charter school, it would fall either through coming through the LEA, or it could potentially come through the governor's funds, which came out in ESSER 1 and ESSER 2. 10% all the time of the money has to be reserved for the state education agency at the state level, for the state to do large-scale state initiatives. The big pot, the American Rescue Plan, the $122 billion, has a few more caveats that are built into that. That's really about learning loss, addressing the issues around learning loss, addressing summer school, and addressing after-school programs. Lucas, if you can go to the next slide. So this is really interesting what we're seeing right now around ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. In general, about 100% of the money coming in has gone into districts when it comes to ESSER 1. When it comes to ESSER 2 funding, it would be interesting to know how many of you actually received your ESSER 2 funding, because a lot of that funding has yet to come into districts. The information we're receiving just in general surveys is, in general, only about 30% of districts across the country have actually seen ESSER 2 funding that has come in to their fiscal accounts. And then ESSER 3, because it's so new and really came out at the end of March, most of that money, around 66%, has been distributed to states. Most of that money hasn't actually gone out to school districts yet. However, like we said with ESSER 1 and ESSER 2, school districts can make some pretty good guesstimates if they haven't received the information yet from their State Department of Education based on their Title I funding in terms of what those allocations will look like. Lucas? So there are really 15 general use categories that are allowable for funds across all three, ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. In general, those categories didn't change from ESSER 1. ESSER 2 carried over those categories. ESSER 3 still has those same 15 categories. The difference is with the American Rescue Plan, as you see here on the right, there are some additional caveats that were put in place. I talked about those just briefly, but really they are very specific to operations around bringing students back post-pandemic. What does that look like in terms of interventions? What does that look like in terms of summer learning opportunities? What does that look like in terms of enrichment, evening, weekend, special programs, and then opportunities to address emotional needs that might come up as the 2021-2022 school year gets going. Here's what we've realized in conversations at PowerSchool with school districts around the country. If you look at these 15 allowable categories, many of these categories fit into a lot of the solutions that we offer at PowerSchool, and it certainly applies to the work that happens around our learning management system, the opportunity to deliver SEL services through our learning management system, and the opportunity to provide enrichment, summer learning, and additional connections with kids that are all about enrichment. Lucas? We can actually probably skip that one. Yep. And so in general, there's a lot of conversation out there about the term learning loss. It's in statute. So it's actually in the law. The American Rescue Plan uses the term learning loss. So it's why you see often the term used over and over again. As an educator, someone who spent 26 years in public education in the state of Maryland, I'm not a fan of the term learning loss, but because it's in statute, we definitely want to connect to that language because districts have to make that connection. Really, we're talking about everything under the bubble around tutoring, addressing achievement gaps, early learning, evidence-based interventions, interaction with families, the home connection, and overwhelmingly special education services. All right, I said a ton here. There's an entire handbook on this. So if you want to do 100 pages of reading, there is a second volume of the Education COVID-19 handbook that was put out by the U.S. Department of Education that talks specifically about all of these different funds and how you can address these funds and how they can potentially be used. We also know that a lot of districts are using the funds that are coming about for people, and that's obviously an allowable use. The big what I hope people take away from this message is this is additional money over top of budgets that are coming in from the state, from your local jurisdiction. We know that in some cases budgets are going to be tight this year, multiple years out. So hopefully the thought is to be really strategic about how you take advantage of these ESSER funds. And I think we definitely have something on here that also has some additional links, Lucas, in case people want them. And since we're recording this, we'll be able to tap into those links and you'll be able to get access to that. If you can go to the next slide.
Correct, yeah. We'll make sure we get that out after.
Yeah, we can skip this one.
All right. Brian, anything else you wanted to add?
Nope, and I'll drop in some of the links in the chat so people can access some of the additional information.
All right, perfect. And I put it in the chat just in case you guys didn't get a chance to see it. We're going to spend about 10, 15 minutes at the end after Gina goes over some of the continued education features within Schoology to jump back into the demo site, and Joe's going to show some of the integration setups as well as a little bit more on the new features coming out because we realize there's a few more questions on that, so we want to make sure we get those addressed as well. So thanks, Ryan, again. All right, Gina.
Okay, I'm up. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gina Hartman. Lucas introduced me at the beginning, but I'll just give you a quick reminder. Again, my name is Gina Hartman, and I'm calling in from the St. Louis, Missouri area. I worked in public education about 20 years before I made the move on this end, and now I'm the Director of Professional Services. I focus on two areas. We focus a lot Schoology PD and also something called Proven Practices at PowerSchool. It's more high quality PD for educators. So my passion is really working with adults, professional learning. So the slide right now that Lucas is showing, I thought was really important to pass along, just some quick information, because I think a lot of times people think about PowerSchool that we just provide solution training. So more product training for maybe the products like Schoology that PowerSchool owns. And so I'm going to give you just a quick overview before we jump back in and answer some of the questions that are coming in the chat area. Just a quick overview of the wide range of professional learning offerings that we do offer. And so we're going to talk a little bit about solution training and what we call continuing education. So more standards aligned, high quality PD offerings. So real quick overview. So if you go to the next slide, Lucas. Yep, I like to kind of always talk to educators about professional learning being a continuous process. I love educational research and what it tells us, what we know is effective in education. And so we clearly know that just a one-time workshop is not effective in education. We really need to think about building a culture of continuous learning. So what you're seeing from this visual, we actually offer more of that solution training, more of the product training on the products. So Schoology, which many of you have probably worked with some of our wonderful professional development specialists, more in that emerging column. So that's more individual sessions. It might be on-site, it might be remote sessions. We have asynchronous self-paced sessions also. We have a great variety. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit more here in a little bit about kind of what falls into our adapting and our innovating column. So this is more PD programs, learning academies. So these are built more around, again, the educational research, what we know is effective, that professional learning should be ongoing, collaborative, work with that expert educator, tie in a coaching piece and things like that. So I'm going to tell you more, just a little bit more about that here in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and pass it back over to Lucas right now. We can probably skip this slide, Lucas, and go to the next one.
Perfect. All right, so really quickly, kind of going off of what Gina just said, Rashad and I wanted to put together some packages for the end of the year rollover. And as you guys start to go into the following semester, hopefully back in class or in classroom as much as possible, for just some packages that we thought were very beneficial. The first one we have is 8 hours of PD that can be used for multiple different courses. I put in a few that are very popular. In the link in the survey is also the full course catalog. Again, these can be used at multiple points throughout the year, but there are some ones that we like to call out through in the summer. The other part of the package is the rollover package, and I'm already working with a lot of schools and districts on this. Probably some of you have already even taken advantage of it. Helps clean out the system, rolls over for the following school year, similar to what you might have experienced on the SIS side as well. Through the better package, a few more additional hours of PD. And we also have the rollover and the professional learning subscription. PLS is great because it's self-paced, ongoing training throughout the whole school year, unlimited training within Schoology that you can do for your staff for Schoology, for new users, refreshers, really anything involved around the product. And then the last thing, just because I know we want to get on to a few more questions on the actual live product. We have the same 3 items from the previous packages, but then also the KTO hours. KTO hours are great for support and setup. So if you need some support or assistance in setting up Schoology District Mastery or any grade integrations or grade setup passbacks if they haven't done previously, that's where the KTO hours come in really handy. So again, I'll forward over some information after on this, so we won't spend any more time on it. But just wanted to call those out.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that information, Lucas. So I'm going back to this visual because really I want you guys to think about professional learning as a continuous process. So Lucas just shared kind of that piece on the left side, the emerging piece, okay? Just getting people in your district familiar with the functionality of Schoology, the SIS, how things work. And so I'm going to come in again and talk a little bit about the adapting and innovating pieces, because I noticed Jason was asking even in the chat area about coaching. So now this is where we tie some of those research-based pieces in. So actually, Lucas is going to pass it over to me so I can give you guys, I'm going to kind of give you a quick overview, and I'm going to share my screen here. And what you're going to see as I share my screen is it's an infographic document. And so we offer so much here on the Schoology PowerSchool end. And so we combined it into an infographic that you can link out, and you can just go to different areas that you're interested in. And actually, Lucas is going to pop this document even in the Zoom chat area for you. So you guys have this handy, you can save it and go to it. So you're going to see on this document those 3 areas: emerging, adopting, and innovating. And so I'm just going to start at the adopting column. So after, a district or educators work with us and they get familiar with how to use the basics of the system, more that solution product training, we always talk to them about come over and continue to work with us if you want to focus on that continuous learning piece. So the first part we called professional learning programs here. They're 4 to 6 week blended PD models or programs. And it's really important to me as an educator to model what we want other educators to do. That goes back to the educational research. And so I'm just going to kind of quickly show on this document, you can click here on the Learn More buttons, and it's going to pop up another document telling you more details about that specific offering if you're interested or you want to dive deeper. And I just want to point out, it's great after people know the specifics of the platform to take a deeper dive, depending on what your goals or initiatives are in your district. Think about your school improvement plans. You'll see we can take a deeper dive into assessment design, developing and evaluating quality assessment questions. We can take it to the next level and start to talk with educators about what does it look like to use Schoology Learning for gamified learning, student engagement, even in adult PD. We have specific offerings on elementary sessions. And I'm not going to cover all these, but really kind of enhancing that home to school connection. So we definitely take a deeper dive into the pedagogy. And so what we do on options like this, it's a 4 to 6 week PD model and includes 4 to 5 PD sessions. Okay, so the PD sessions might be on site using that blended model, virtual, synchronous via Zoom like we're on now, and asynchronous self-paced built in the system. So we tie in the digital coaching piece using the powerful communication tools in Schoology. So that's where we tie in those research-based pieces. So that's just one quick offering. There's a couple other offerings in that adopting column. One is called PD Bytes. This was really popular when the pandemic hit because we were getting so many questions. Gina, our teachers, it's survival. Our teachers need to know how to teach in a fully digital blended environment right now. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about PD Bytes. I love this because it really helps you kind of build a custom PD plan too over a longer period of time for educators in your district. So I'm going to click here on Learn More and just open up this document. And again, I'm not going to read a whole lot on it. You guys will have this at your fingertips. You can dive in deeper if you want. The way that this works, it's all virtual PD because we had to have an all virtual PD option the past year. And so it's 5 weeks, 5 sessions, and you can build your own PD plan. So we like to work with educators after they already know the basics of Schoology. And so we're going to come in and again, focus on pedagogy, modeling different things. So you'll see just the first session is titled Best Practices of Our Digital Learning. And then from there, the person that our team works with at the district level can kind of look at 15 of these other session topics and select 4 of them to build your custom PD plan to, really try to meet the personal learning needs of educators in your district. And so you'll see, I'll just point out a couple quick ones. Here's one, Schoology Learning in the 4 C's. There's another one talking about designing dynamic discussions to engage learners. We want people to already know how to build discussions in Schoology when they come over to the continuing ed offerings. We're going to talk about the best way to build discussions to differentiate instruction, layering questions, getting students to deeper levels of understanding and collaboration. So just real quick, hopefully you're kind of understanding the package approach, the academy approach really aligns with the research, and we offer a lot. One of our newest offerings, and it's in that adapting column, is called the Digital Leadership Academy. A lot of what we offer too, it goes back to feedback from the district work with. And this academy is all targeted towards principals and assistant principals. I'm just going to pull it up. In this Learning Academy, there's 7 sessions. Again, we're modeling blended PD. Sessions 1 through 6 are actually 2-hour Zoom sessions because we know that it's hard to get time with principals and assistant principals. Session 7 is an on-site planning day, and we have it titled Planning and Continuous Improvement. What we actually want, we want to help districts with the leaders. You know, leaders are the instructional leaders too for the educators in their building. So we want them to actually come out with an action plan for their building or their district for next steps, just to help continue to build capacity with your digital learning journey. So that's just a real quick summary of that Digital Leadership Academy.
Thank you, Gina.
One final thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
One final thing I want to point out is in the innovating column, we do, and I won't spend much time on this. This is an extensive learning academy that spans an entire school year. Okay. And again, you'll see it's research-based. It's what we've earned the ISTE seal of alignment for. And there's just a link here. If you click learn more, that will tell you more details about it. Lucas, I haven't been checking the chat while I've just been giving a quick summary, so I don't know if any quick questions have come in you want to point out to me.
Nope, we're good now. So okay. I appreciate it. Is my screen back up? Proven practices. Gina, do you want to finish up on this and I'll pass it over to Joe?
Sounds perfect. So you guys are getting a little bit of a sneak peek about what's coming. You're actually the first group to even hear about this. So we're calling it's the Accelerated Learning Gains Academy. Again, anytime I design something new with my team of educators on my team, we think about how can it be more than one individual workshop? Because again, we look at research-based practices and what's been proven effective. So again, it includes 5 sessions. It allows us to work with educators over a longer period of time, tie in that digital coaching piece, encourage them to apply their learning. So you're going to see that, again, this is a blended professional learning model. We use Schoology to deliver our blended PD. So it includes a couple face-to-face on-site days, a couple live web sessions. We use Zoom, and then an asynchronous self-paced session. So the people working with us really experience blended learning as a learner, and they can think about how they can use it in the classroom with their teacher or their students, or if they're a district level person, how they can incorporate it into their curriculum practices or the professional development they're designing. And you'll just see the topics there. You know, we're really going to focus on in session 1, clarify learning and improve engagement. So thinking about just the past year a little bit and referring back to research-based practices, a lot of John Hattie's work, and how we should really think about that and how it applies to digital learning and even using Schoology. The second session, lesson designed to meet the needs of all learners, thinking about how to redesign lessons using a different blended learning model. You'll see the third session there kind of ties into social emotional learning. We have it titled Reconnecting and Building Positive Relationships. The asynchronous self-paced session is Planning for Flipped Instruction. And then the last session is Empowering Independent Learners. If you want more information about this, I have more detailed information, just very brief on the slide I was going to share with you today. I'll pass it back over to Lucas.
Thanks, Gina. I appreciate it. Joe, I'm going to pass it over to you. You want to pull up your screen and we'll go a little bit more into some of the new features following up on that first section.
Sure. So a lot of the questions look like they were around the integrations with the Gradebook Passback. So I'm just going to show some more of the administrative side of that. So when we think about things like the integrations there, I know there was a question about having that, even the traditional or numeric grade passback. When is that fired off and when those changes can be made? So we do have the ability to actually push that based off of triggers. So whenever a grade is added, changed, or removed, that'll be updated. Some of the other questions were around flags and comments that go with those grades. I will have to follow up with the flags to be exact. I know things like making something exempt from the gradebook can be followed, but things like submitted, unsubmitted, and some of those other options that you had in PowerTeacher Pro might have to follow up with if those can follow over too, but the comments do. So if you have comments with a grade, that can follow back as well. And then when we're talking about the standards-based grading and how that actually connects with that, that's going to be, if you have both traditional and standards-based grading, you can do that as well. So you will be able to have, those kind of blended learning items where you have a learning objective aligned with an assignment as well as a traditional base grading or numeric. And then this is where some of those other connections exist. So when we think about that export tool, having our grade book, having our attendance, and being able to control where those come in. Let me see some of the other questions. Oh, if you are having issues with the Gradebook Passback, one piece of that might be if you need to wait for things like that, the new version of the student information system. That's going to be a big helpful tool that comes out when it does come out. And then the other piece is if you're currently having those issues, be sure to reach out to support or your account executive or somebody who can get you in contact with the appropriate resources to be able to take a look at that, make sure everything's set up properly, and things along those lines. Let me see. Lucas, what else did we have for notes? Was there anything else that we needed to add in there?
Yeah, well, one comment I want to make on you made on the issues. If you're having ongoing issues with grades or anything else in Schoology, and please submit a case or a ticket first. If you haven't heard back within a few days or a day or so, you can reach out to your account rep with the ticket number and we can escalate it too. So, you know, we don't always have direct access to the support side, but we're here to help. So we can always escalate any issues that you do run across and you're not hearing back from support in a timely manner. That's what we're here for. So please let us know on that side. And then let's see, a few of the questions more around, I guess, the standards-based grading. I saw Jennifer just had one in the chat. Also, standards passback attached to traditional grades or just mastery.
So you can track those standards in both the traditional as well as in a learning objective. So they can be tracked if you have kind of a different setup for each one. You can actually track them differently. So your standards could be aligned with kind of that more traditional mastery district setup. And then also even in the traditional, the numeric ones, you can use that nomenclature. What it did before is it would translate that word into a number, into PowerTeacher Pro. And I think that's where a lot of schools were kind of focused on, because when a parent sees that, you know, you might be meets and that's a 3 out of 4 and they see a 75%. But what you're able to do now is by using that standards-based grading, they only see the verbiage, not the number, and they don't need to see like a percentage that goes along with that. And then also that kind of comes with educating your families as well.
Right on. Thanks, Joe. And then so Alex, to answer your questions, I just saw that pop up. We are working on getting some of the support teams aligned, a little bit aligned more. Obviously with last year and everything that went on, we had to keep those separate just because we wanted to focus on Schoology support and not overdoing it and causing support times to increase. So we had those teams separate, but it's something that we're working on to merge those to make it a little bit more streamlined so you don't feel like you're talking to a completely different product line altogether. And then is Joe, do you see that last question right now?
Let me pop up in the chat here real quick.
And we, Alex, also that point, we'll push some information along to the support team and let them know that customers are mentioning that, or it's an ongoing issue for you guys.
So the question is for anybody who's not in the chat right now, it's is there an option to have an assignment marked as missing or show up as ungraded? If it does show up as ungraded right now, you have to go through the gradebook to see if the student has submitted an assignment once I've marked it as missing. So what will happen is in the gradebook, you can have anything that you can switch it so that anytime there's anything that's ungraded, you can mark it as missing or not submitted. And then depending on what your notifications are when the student does submit it, as long as you don't lock it down after a due date, you'll get a notification that would just show up like right here, letting you know that that student has submitted that. You can also have that pushed to your email as well, if I'm understanding that question correctly.
Perfect. Thanks, Joe. On the report cards comments field in Schoology, that is not on the initial roadmap. We are working more towards a bilateral passback. Part of the issue with the API connection is for right now, it goes Schoology to PowerSchool SIS and PowerTeacher Pro, not back to Schoology. And that's where your report card comments land. is more on the PowerTeacher Pro side. A really helpful thing, I'm going to post it in the chat as soon as I get it, is the Schoology product roadmap. So just something to bookmark, keep an eye on as we go throughout the school year and ongoing. We put in there what's in research, what's in development, and obviously what's being completed. So you guys kind of have a better idea on what's planned. And as a company, we're always looking to improve more. So we have a section for recommendations as well to put in there. And then, so let me see, how about syncing the parents' information from SIS to Schoology?
Yeah, as far as being able to have the parents log in and their information that way, we can essentially, so you're going to use that same login information, that single sign-on information for the parents as for the student information system. And then that way you can align things like the students that go along with that parent and so on. But as far as like address information or some of the stuff that you keep as a profile for Schoology, as long as there's a field to sync them both or map them both together, you can potentially do that. I'm not sure. We might need to have like a side conversation to see what specifically you're looking for to map back and forth.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, on that one. Parent information is a little bit more complicated just because it's not as consistent with emails and names. It's usually external. The student and teacher information is a lot easier to map since how that's set up within the school.
Mm-hmm. It's very consistent data, whereas your families, they can change their email address and change how they want to log in. And when they first enroll, they might want to have it go to one email, but they want to have all their grades go to a different email, change work, things like that. So that's where that complexity comes in.
Now, we do have a few more minutes, so if anybody wants to put in a few more questions, we'll be sure to get to them. And if not, we'll also put in, I'm going to bring up the contact information again in a second, and you feel free to always email Rashad and I after. But we'll give this last 5 minutes before we wrap it up for any further questions if you guys want to post in the chat. Is it possible to not have courses archived the day after the semester ends? Teachers usually submit grades up to a week after a grading period. In PowerSchool, you could choose how long after teachers can submit grades. Having Schoology courses archived is a real problem. That was the last question from Linda. Joe, do you have anything on that?
So I'll have to see if there's a specific setting that will allow it to be opened up for grading. But a workaround for that might be that you set your grading periods to be a week longer. And then in your courses, to hide it from students, you just have your publishing dates go to that specific date range. So that way your students can't go back in and make any changes or new submissions or anything like that. And then you can do that. Otherwise, you can go back in your gradebook and change the grading period. So let me switch over to my teacher here. When I go into the gradebook for one of my courses, you can change the time frame that you're looking at. And you can do that right here. We'll give that a moment to load up with all of my semesters and everything.
While that's loading, Jennifer, to answer your question, I have a few training and FAQ materials now. All the releases on the SIS side and Schoology are set for early June. So that should be when majority of the rest of it comes available. First and second week, I would keep an eye out for that.
Yep, so another question came in about the redundancy for Schoology and then attendance, fixing grades, and so on. That is what this demonstration is about. It's actually about the release of being able to do that. And that's going to come along with that new SIS revision, the 21.4.1, where if you update it in Schoology, all of your grades, your attendance is going to pass back into PowerTeacher Pro.
And well, I'd like to just mention, I don't know if you jumped on a little late here, but that's exactly what we'd gone over the first piece there. So your mastery gradebook will automatically sync to your PowerTeacher Pro. Your traditional gradebook, as long as it's synced on from both ends to align with one another, will sync automatically, and that can be pushed into PowerTeacher Pro, which will then create a final grade in a report card. And of course, the attendance piece is also another functionality that's going to be available as well. And that is also new. There aren't any other learning management systems or student information systems on the market today that are going to allow that functionality. We are the first and the only on the market to be able to do that. So that's really one of the things that we wanted to make sure that you guys knew about. We are getting a lot of kind of questions in regards to the syncing. If you have any issues with syncing, the vast majority of times there are some issues with someone making some adjustments to the grade setup. From an admin level, if you would like for your teachers to avoid that, most of the time the admin team will lock away that permission to allow teachers to adjust or make any changes to that grade setup. Once it's aligned on the front end, usually aren't really any other issues with the grade or syncing going back and forth. Okay.
Awesome. Thanks, Rashad, for
If
that.
you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us offline. We can certainly answer any more questions with you guys, meet with your teams, but we're more than happy to help.
Perfect. So in terms of time, I want to be respectful to everybody. So I will wrap this up with a few last comments. One thing I do like to call out on the attendance feature that's coming out, that is going to mirror to your PowerSchool SIS attendance. I saw a question earlier on that. So just want to highlight that. Whatever you have set up in SIS, you will have, that's what will be mirrored in Schoology. So just call out there. So I'll share this document over after, as well as the recording and a few of the links that we've thrown in here in the chat for you guys to review. Here's Rashad and I's contact information. Again, myself, Lucas Rodriguez, I support districts and schools east and central, essentially east in the Mississippi, and then Rashad covers them west of the Mississippi. If you're wondering who to reach out to, if it's the wrong person, we'll forward it to one another just to be sure. So again, thank you everybody for taking time out of your Tuesday afternoon. Keep an eye out for that email from Rashad and I either this afternoon or tomorrow. And if there's any further questions, we'll make sure we get those over to you. And then from the questions today, we'll be following up with a few of you as well that had additional questions in the chat. So thank you again very much and enjoy the rest of your week.
I'll remain on the chat for a little longer.
Oh, when is the anticipated release? June. Early June is when Schoology will have its release there. And then for the PowerSchool SIS side, I mentioned at the beginning, but you want to make sure that you are updated with the newest release on the PowerSchool SIS. We just had one this last week, and then there should be another one first week of June as well, which will be 21.5. So keep an eye out that. If you're hosted already, you shouldn't have to worry. If you are on-prem, we send out the updates to PowerSource of PowerSchool community, so keep an eye out there.